And now it is Mike Pence who will not guarantee that he and 25th Amendment boy will accept the outcome of the election. And Senator Mike Lee of Utah tweeted late last night that democracy isn't the objective. Liberty, peace, and prosperity are. We want the human condition to flourish. Rank democracy can thwart that. And the FBI today has revealed it has arrested 6, quote, militia members, unquote, who wanted to kidnap Governor Whitmer of Michigan, conduct some sort of trial of her, and violently overthrow the state government, and had gotten so far as 2 surveillance trips to her summer home. Happily, none of those 3 things have anything in common. Oh yeah, they do. April 17th, Twitler said, "Liberate Michigan." October 8th, armed right-wing terrorist arrested for trying to overthrow the government of Michigan. And a Trump stooge, Jason Miller, just attacked Governor Whitmer on Fox News for the crime of hating Donald Trump. Stochastic terror, saying the words, getting the subhuman sadists to oil up their weapons and carry it out. In addition to the 6 arrested, the FBI should be advocating charging Trump as an unindicted co-conspirator. And it all ties together. Because while it was comforting to watch Kamala Harris school Pence, and yes, the bug in Pence's hair reminded us that 50 billion flies can't be wrong. But if tonight you are still thinking of them, you missed yet another unmistakable warning that this administration is willing to try to end the tradition of peaceful transfer of power. Will Trump accept the election results if he loses? The moderator asked the falsely pious failed talk show host last night. First, Pence deflected. Quote, "I must tell you, Senator, your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election." Certainly that invoking of the impeachment is the most acrobatic twist in American political history. The impeachment would not have overturned the election. It would have given us President Mike Pence. Apparently Mike Pence doesn't know this. Asked again, Pence got down to Trump's dream of a coup. Quote, "If we have a free and fair election, we know we're going to have confidence in it," he said, "and I believe in my heart that President Trump will be reelected for 4 more years. Wrong answer, fascist. It was more mundane, less theatrical than Trump's threats, than Trump's tautology of, "I'll accept a free and fair election result, and I'll also decide what's free and what's fair." But it all means the same thing. These creatures, Trump, Pence, Barr, Ratcliffe, the others, they are authoritarians for whom the word democracy is nothing more than a brand name, and they will use any means available to stay in power. It is clear in retrospect now that in June, Trump and Pence and Barr and the rest of them tested one option for staying in power: the attack on the peaceful protesters in Lafayette Park who were in the way of Trump's Bible photo op on June 1st was, I am now convinced, less about clearing paths than it was about gauging the use of future force. It was about seeing whether or not the military would support Trump staying in office regardless of the outcome of the election. Would they do anything Trump asked? The answer came quickly. A day later, on June 2, when Trump floated using the Insurrection Act against the protesters, the Pentagon leaked to several reporters its discomfort with even the possibility of it. The same day, the Secretary of Defense leaked, backed away from the photo op, said he was told they were going there to inspect damage. The next day, June 3rd, was the day of the generals. The Secretary of Defense went on record to say the Insurrection Act was only as good as a last resort and, quote, "We are not in one of those situations now." The chairman of the Joint Chiefs the same day issued an order reminding all troops that they owe their loyalty to the Constitution. The commandant of the National Guard issued a reminder about the Constitution having precedence over the president. The commandant of the Marine Corps sent out a memo to his own troops reminding them they are against discrimination in this country and against division. Trump's original Secretary of Defense the same day described him as a threat to the Constitution and compared Trump to the Nazis. These were not coincidences. They were warnings to Trump from the generals. This is not to say a beaten Trump would not try to use the military by inspiring or staging the proverbial Reichstag fire. But those 3 days in June suggested that if he suddenly announced the election had been compromised by China or Iran, it is doubtful that our military leaders would listen to him. So, the play that Trump and Pence are making no effort to hide is not a military coup per se, but rather to inspire these militias like the terrorists in Michigan to turn Election Day into chaos and then sue to overturn the election because Election Day was chaos. If they get Judge Barrett on the court and they get enough Republicans to support it and they get a close enough voting outcome, they may try Bush v. Gore on the grand scale. Yet, without broad support from pliant rank-and-file Republicans, it cannot happen. And sure enough, in a Washington Post story today from Robert Costa, there are the hints that some Republicans are trying to back away from Trump. Underscored those priceless moments when Martha McSally in the Arizona Senate debate the other night was almost pretending she did not recognize Trump's name. Even Senator Cornyn of Texas, who you would not think was smart enough to do so, was quoted criticizing Trump. But if the military won't keep Trump in power and the members of the Republican Party seem to be less likely than ever before to risk arrest for an attempted coup, why is Trump still refusing to say he will leave? And why did bland old Pence echo him in last night's debate? I think I know why. To figure this part out, we must recognize the true depth of the darkness by understanding what might be a more awful truth still standing behind this demonic president. Our best case scenario, our brightest outcome on election day is a landslide, so thorough and unequivocal that even Trump's enablers, the Republican Party, political whores, every one of them, will not go out onto the limb with him and try to overturn his election defeat in the courts or on the streets or with the military. It must be a win so overwhelming that they and these maggots who believe in fascism, the kind that Donald Trump has already brought to this country, scurry back into their holes, disbelieving and shocked, but, like him, ultimately interested only in one thing: saving their own asses. Our best case scenario is a defeated Trump having no alternative but to concede defeat. And yet, you know in your heart what would follow even that decisive and blessed moment. If Trump actually accepts losing, he will not even pause for breath before he immediately announces that he is seeking the presidency in 2024. And therein lies the real terror of this time of the madman. What he revealed about America and to the unprincipled scum who have been for decades merely pretending they are not racist, they are not homophobic, they are not anti-Semitic, they are not anti-democracy, they are not obsessed with violence and death. The shy haters. What he revealed is they will not go away just because Trump concedes an election. They have been authenticated by him. They have been told that their failures are somebody else's fault. They have been reassured that their worthlessness is the result of enemy A or enemy B or enemy C. They have been given 5 years in the sunlight and they are a blight that will be with us for generations. There can be no mistaking what is ahead of us in this best of possible scenarios, a period in which a Trump-led minority will continue to terrorize this country. And Trump, whose only barely human delight comes from the applause of the morons in the crowd, will seek that pleasure again and endlessly until the day he dies. We unleashed this terrorism via the activating mechanism of reality television. Trump unleashed his terrorists via the activating mechanism of encouraging them to hate. Trump can be and must be expunged. The hate he has triggered, the Pandora's box he has opened, they will not be so easily destroyed. So, let us brace ourselves. The task is twofold. The terrorist Trump must be defeated, must be destroyed, must be devoured at the ballot box. And then he and his enablers and his supporters and his collaborators and the Mike Lees and the William Barrs and the Sean Hannitys and the Mike Pences and the Rudy Giulianis and the Kyle Rittenhouses and the Amy Coney Barretts must be prosecuted and convicted and removed from our society while we try to rebuild it, and to rebuild the world Trump has nearly destroyed by turning it over to a virus. Remember it, even as we dream of a return to reality and safety and the country for which our forefathers died, that the fight is not just to win an election, but to win it by enough to chase, at least for a moment, Trump and the maggots off the stage, and then try to clean up what they left. Remember it, even though to remember it means remembering that the fight does not end November 3rd, but in many ways will only begin that day. All right, let me explain what the headlines are. Every day here on YouTube. We will go through them rather rapidly and obviously begin with the commentary that you just saw. But let me give you a little news of the day, as they say. The number one story here, I think, is Pelosi announcing during the day that they're going to be talking about the 25th Amendment tomorrow. There will be a press conference. As somebody who's long supported the use of the 25th Amendment, it is a little confusing as to what it applies to. She will be introducing legislation and discussing on Friday to establish a commission on introduction on presidential capacity, legislation on presidential capacity to discharge the powers and duties of office. This is essentially clarifying and codifying the 25th Amendment. I think it is also largely to scare the crap out of Trump, because obviously if this legislation passed, to figure out what the 25th Amendment means and how it can be used, rather than simply having a vote of the people who support the president in power to say he's nuts or he's infirm or he cannot fulfill his duties, to have some sort of process by making that happen. If it were passed, I think he might veto it. I think in the short term its value is as follows. It will, ironically enough, cause him to discharge his duties. The virtual debate news. The debate commission says number 2, the town hall, will have the candidates in different locations, and Trump objects and, as usual, as always, gives away what his game plan was. He says he's opposed to a virtual debate because it makes it easier for them to cut off his microphone. Obviously, it was his intention to do what he did in the first debate, to try to filibuster through everything Joe Biden said. I will leave it to you to decide whether or not the purpose of filibustering Biden was, as rumored, to try to instigate and reactivate Joe Biden's stutter. I will point out that Trump's only real chance down the stretch here, and the things at least that he can control, is to make Biden or put Biden in a position to make a campaign-ending mistake or a lead-blowing mistake, something so big. So if Trump wants to boycott those debates and make sure that Biden can't screw up and end his lead in one of those debates, hey, great, the round of chloroquine is on me. Non-disclosure agreements is our third story. That trip to Walter Reed last year, we still don't know why Trump was hospitalized. We're not going to, because Trump made all the medical personnel sign non-disclosure agreements. Same for the hospitalization last week, which probably explains why Commander Sean Conley sounded more like Commander Cody from the rock and roll days of the 20th century. He said almost nothing whatsoever and seemed to have no capacity for understanding medicine. Well, this was because simply he was being legally blackmailed. If he said anything Trump didn't like, Trump could sue him. This is how Trump has succeeded without getting caught yet. Simply, it's going to take somebody like Jeff Bezos to be willing to pay for anybody who violates a non-disclosure agreement for us to actually understand what's been going on the last few years. You have the money, Jeff. Put it up in a policy and a process in a big lump sum, so everybody who wants to violate a Trump non-disclosure agreement will be covered legally in case Trump sues. The polls. Biden is at +10 on the average of polls today, but the only numbers that are really worth paying attention to are the New York Times "If the polls were as wrong as 2016" poll, which is a wonderful way to use a disaster and make it into another brand name. Those numbers, if the polls are as wrong as they were in 2016, Biden is ahead nationally by 7. He's ahead by 2 in Florida, 3 in Minnesota and Pennsylvania, 4 in Michigan and Arizona, 7 in New Hampshire, and 10 in Nebraska, 2. Trump would be ahead, not Biden, by 5 in Ohio, and those are the, if we really screwed up the polls again numbers, the we're going to have to take Nate Silver's shoelaces and tie away from him numbers. And lastly, okay, I can't resist, 2 jokes from the vice presidential debate. Joke number 1. Sure, I want to vote for the guy who didn't know for 2 minutes that there was a big fly stuck on his head. And number 2, ready? The fly lands on Pence. A staffer comes out and starts swatting Pence's head. So the moderator says, "Did you get the fly?" And the staffer says, "What fly?" Good night and good luck.